because those people, as you know, are very, very easy to find if you start, posting on job boards of people with 20 years of experience in each of those different areas. You'll find.
And I think that's the other thing too, because we're seeing an exact situation there where somebody has SQL Server, they have Redshift.
Welcome to the Financial Innovations Podcast, helping CFOs save money and time by investing in cutting-edge technology. I'm here with Nicho Mann. Nicho, it's great to see you today.
Daniel, it's been a while. Actually, it hasn't been that long, but it's good to see you too.
Yes, it has. So, we have a lot of great stuff to talk about today. Just, given Nicho's background, we'll give you a chance to, share a little bit about yourself, Nicho, here in a second. But Nicho brings a wealth and breadth of experience just in terms of different technologies that financial teams will find very helpful. So, Nicho, you want to just introduce yourself real quick, and then we could start jumping into it.
Sounds great. Everyone, Nicho Mann, CEO, founder, Stratos Consulting, and we've been around for just about 6 years, and I've spent most of my career in the financial implementation space as well as data and analytics. And so Stratos as an organization is a data and analytics consultancy. So we do everything from strategy and advisory to really help you get your core data architecture correct and really foundational before then moving into the true implementation of that. So now that you have an idea and a vision for where you want to go, let's actually go about and execute that. And we'll partner with you. We'll bring in our team, use your team's resources, whatever makes sense and is helpful for you. And of course, everyone is a little bit different. So you get to the end of this project, you're happy with the solution. Then you might say, hey, we could use your additional help to actually support this environment and support the system. Or, hey, Stratos, can you transition it to our own internal team? And we're certainly happy to do that as well. So really focusing on that end-to-end life cycle. And we certainly cover a variety of industries. So very heavy within the life sciences pharmaceutical space. And we branched out into retail, manufacturing, financial services. So being able to really focus on helping people in their organizations with data and get the most insights that they can out of it. So really excited to have a conversation with you today.
Yeah, no, that's great. And, it feels like, especially with the push to the cloud, that, all these different applications kind of pop up out of the woodwork in terms of different technologies. And, I know that a lot of executives, struggle with the, hey, I have a limited budget. The size of that budget will range depending on the company there, but everyone's got a limited budget, and they want to know, hey, what gets me the best bang for my buck? Like, what are you seeing companies investing in, the most right now?
I think one of the biggest changes that we've seen in the industry, call it in the last 3 years, is actually taking a step back and saying, what are we trying to accomplish in the first place? Because so many people come in and say, oh, I want to do this big data initiative. I want to get all these dashboards. It's going to give access to my team or the collective organization. And then they go out and do this. And then they find, well, no one's actually using it. We didn't get the right data in the first place. There's not a lot of benefit coming out of it. But you know what? That person can check off their list and say, hey, I did a successful project for my company, be it they get promoted or move somewhere else. But at the end of the day, the company never really gets the value that they had set out to in the first place. So I slightly challenge that question and say, well, what should people actually focus on now, even before thinking about like the project, the technology? And a lot of that is really taking a step back and saying, what do we want to do in the first place that's going to add the most ROI to our organization, to our functions within those organizations? And then you can start to say and that takes time. And I think that's why a lot of people would skip that. But now it's become such a focus because budgets are constrained. So you're not going to go do $1 million project without spending 10, 20,000 up front to actually go validate that project in the first place. And when I say validate, I'm talking things like, let me actually have interviews with my stakeholders or other people who I think are going to go get value out of this data, out of these dashboards. Let me challenge what they're actually doing on a day-to-day basis because they say they're so busy with certain things. Let's actually validate that they're saying they're going to get more value by automating a lot of this data, bringing it together and giving them those insights, or is that just a nice to have? So it's a long way of saying, validate first, because companies cannot afford to spend the money and be wrong on these initiatives. So why not spend a little bit of money up front to get it right? And the other thing that really helps for as well is you get to define those requirements a lot more foundationally, and you get buy-in from people across the organization. Because so many times, and Daniel, you probably remember this so often, say, oh yeah, we got all these requirements, everyone's in, and we start the project, and then you come to find out, well, nobody told Joe in IT that he needed to be part of this project and what his level of effort is. And oh, by the way, he's on sabbatical for a month, so he can't help with this project. So going back to this assessment, you say, hey, let's get the requirements, but also let's get buy-in from the resources who are going to be involved and their time constraints and availability to make sure it truly can be a successful initiative. Because that's easy to do when you have 3 to 5 people on a project, but when you have a project with 50 to 100 people or even more, you have to do that. Otherwise, you're going to run into all these issues, and anyone could have predicted that, but people sometimes just don't like taking the time to do it.
Right. And I feel like that's where a lot of companies struggle the most is that, you're trying to strike the balance between how big do I start, and a lot of these projects start as these successful, proof of concepts, if you will, of one person wants the data for, his or her group, and they go get the data, it works, they say, hey, look at these fancy dashboards, or, really any kind of analysis that's out there, and then everyone says, oh, I want that, the shiny dashboard, and before you know it, you're bringing in all this data, and nobody's cataloged the data, nobody's said, hey, look, is this data stored in an optimized place, or did someone just feed their Excel spreadsheet into a data warehouse to test this out, and that's what you're playing with over there. So it's hard to strike that balance of how many people do you bring in the beginning, and how do you make sure that that your standards and everything is being followed, and your procedures and all those documents are actually being created during the project.
Definitely. And I think you bring up a great point around the proof of concept, because proof of concepts, 100% completely agree, are fantastic if you focus on the right thing to do a proof of concept for. And what I mean by that is you don't need to do a proof of concept that with 95% certainty is going to be easy to do. And people are like, oh, yeah, that looks great. You could have mocked it up over a weekend. You have to spend the time doing the things that are going to be the most difficult on the project. And I'm talking about, hey, the complexities around certain calculations, around certain data. Is this data even structured or feasible to get it in the format that we need? I feel like so often people say, oh, yeah, we did a proof of concept. Yeah, but you didn't do it for the right thing to focus on in the first place. So I think that's hugely valuable to begin with. But the other thing, too, is you think about project sponsors or stakeholders or people who are going to be the lead for these projects. You need to find the people who are so bought into this initiative that they're like, I'm putting my neck out there. I'm willing to risk potentially my job at this company for doing such a major initiative, because you need someone with that energy and that willingness to make that project successful. Because if someone's forced into a position just to say, hey, you have to go take this project, another project I have to do, and they're never going to be in the right headspace to want to do this in the first place. I don't care if it's a data project, strategy, process improvement, any of that. If their willingness and their vision isn't there for it, then the project is very, very likely to fail and has nothing to do with anyone else other than that person's not set up for success. So I think that's a huge consideration as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. Definitely great insight over there. With the push to the cloud, do you see, typically in the past when products were all on premise and you'd put them on your server, there's a level of IT buy-in that you would just have to get, where someone's got to provision a server for you, someone's got to install the software on the server, and bring the data over there. And now it's kind of like, well, you just go and pull out your credit card, and a server in the cloud is instantly provisioned with whatever you need on there. Have you seen the role of IT and IT's buy-in change, kind of with the emergence of the cloud, or is it still, just kind of how it's always been, just maybe shifted a little?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point too. I mean, for you and I both, I think we started our careers, what is it, 12 years ago or so. But the point being is that we are at the point where on-prem was really stable and people had these massive architectures on it. Big data was just coming on the scenes. People are trying Hadoop and Spark and Scoop and all these other terms I can't think of. And there was always a lot of kind of like this talk and buzz around it, but we never saw really any good quality implementations around it, because the use case was never really there for it. But then this always goes back to IT owning those pieces and always wanting, not always, but in the cases that we saw, wanting to push technology first. And I worked in IT as well. I was within a pharmaceutical company within IT. I saw it firsthand. Is people get excited about the technology first, and then don't really think about the business value that's going on there. And so, to answer your question, though, yes, everything had to go through IT back then, and say, okay, well, does IT really see the value in this, or do I need to go convince my IT constituents, my team, to really get buy-in for why I need this as a business person? It almost felt like IT was the gatekeeper in so many ways, in that you can only have access to certain things because I tell you that. And now it's almost gone the opposite, where it's people are selling into the business because the business is the one who needs the value, and people actually recognize that. And these cloud providers have created solutions that say, hey, you can go get this on a credit card. You can go spin up a proof of concept really quickly and not need IT. And that's where the power of something like Snowflake comes into play, because you don't have to be this data engineer or have years and years of technical infrastructure and experience. You have a credit card, you go sign up, you log in. Oh, cool, pretty good user interface, couple videos on how to get some data in the environment. Maybe I know some basic SQL, or maybe I throw Tableau on top of that. But the point is, I could do that within 90 minutes or less and not have to involve IT. I mean, 10 years ago, we would spend weeks just trying to get some basic art infrastructure set up for a database, or even to get a database schema provisioned with the right sizing that we needed. And it would take forever. And then the business would come to you and say, hey, Daniel, why is this taking so long? We're spending so much money on this project. Why can't you guys move? Well, we're working with IT and we can't get anything done, even no matter how much we pressure them, because you know why? IT, they didn't care. That, not that they didn't care. It was not their priority to say, "Oh, this is my one project or my major project." They had a bunch of other projects going on too, and I completely get that. So now the vision has changed, where you don't need IT to do that to the same level of what they did before. And quite frankly, all of our clients who we work with have followed that route, and then they bring IT on board, and yeah, they have some guidance, but it's not IT owning that anymore. It's them who have the ability to do that, and it just makes things so much easier for setup time, for procurement, for kicking off the project itself. So yes, it has completely transformed the landscape that we've seen in the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, and I really like what you brought up about, the business being, start they're excited about the technology, and the amount of time it takes to get all that infrastructure set up. And when you're waiting 2 weeks, 3 weeks just to say, hey, the server's up now, you can wait another 3 weeks or 4 weeks for a database to be put on there, and another 6 to 8 weeks for data to be brought in there. Your level of excitement might start very high, and it's just going to start waning over time. And by the time the project gets started, it's almost like, oh man, we just have to finish this at this point, versus like, hey, we have a really cool idea and this is going to bring a lot of value to the company, like let's just get everybody on board and pushing through. There's a much different demeanor of the people you're working with after they've had to wait 12 to 16 weeks to get all the stuff set up. And that's assuming you have the hardware. Then you have to buy, if you have to buy the servers, forget it. You'll wait a year before you could actually start from when you come up with the idea, versus you pull out your credit card and and here you go, you're up and running in 90 minutes. And I know you mentioned about Snowflake, Tableau. What kinds of improvements on timeline are you seeing with companies that go and say, hey, let me spin up a Snowflake instance, let's get some dashboards in there now, versus what it used to be.
Let's even just talk about procuring the software in the first place, because I feel like that was so much of a thing that would push timelines. And if you think of a finance team, FP&A, they're always thinking in the mindset of, I need this yesterday because I have to do a month end close. I always don't have the information I need in the time that I need it, and everyone's breathing down my neck to get the books closed or to close the budget or the next forecast. Meanwhile, you go throw something over the fence to IT, we'll get back to you in 4 to 6 weeks. And it's like, are you out of your mind? We would have closed a month by now, or 2 months by the time you actually get back to us to kick off something like this. So you think about, at the time it took to procure any type of database, any type of on-prem infrastructure, say like a Tableau server that was on-prem, or an Oracle database, that would take weeks and weeks and weeks through procurement, through licensing, through people getting onboarded, setting up permissions, all that. we're going through a project right now. We're kicking something off with one of our clients, and they're essentially transitioning off of Informatica and Redshift, and they're moving more to the modern data stack. So you think of Snowflake, Fivetran, DBT, and High Touch. So now you have 4 different products coming into play here. Within a week, we've been able to have all of the right conversations with those teams, get the appropriate information to make a decision. And now all it is to get those set up is literally to pull the trigger, and we can get running within a day on those technologies and set up. And then Tableau, they already have Tableau, but the same thing. You can literally, once you get approval, go in there. Your Tableau environment online is set up within, I think it's a couple hours. Maybe it's faster now. But the point is, you can have all of these products now in the modern data stack for cheaper because you can now manage the cost on your own, and it's not just license driven, and you can get going on that project as soon as possible. And you don't have to have deep technical expertise to do it. Again, going back to, you can have these videos to get going on things. With the modern data stack, you don't have to know APIs or how to code them anymore, be this deep data engineer. It's, oh, okay, I have this set of connectors. I have 300 connectors. There are my core applications I can bring in from Salesforce, from Viva, from NetSuite, from HubSpot, from all of these different systems that are out there. Bring that in, it drops and creates that schema for you within Snowflake automatically, replicating that data in the cadence that you want. And now you have all that data ready to go. So from whereas before you had to start creating all of these pipelines, it was very complicated. You needed data engineers. Now you can just get all that data out there. Yes, you still need some technical expertise to be able to do some analysis, but use a visualization tool. Again, if you don't know SQL, drop it in there and start exploring that data. And so to answer your question, I mean, you're talking about going from even months to procure hardware and software in the past to being able to do that within a week or less, say at a very optimal speed. And then you can stand up so much of that information very quickly. You're not following this really long waterfall methodology of delivery anymore either. So it's just cutting down on cost in so many different ways.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a great point. And it used to be that a lot of time and analysis went into, you have to be very deliberate about what data you're bringing into your applications, and you had to spend a lot of time up front, because to your point, you had to code all these pipelines manually. There wasn't just a drag and drop, click this button and now all your data is over. So you had to really, really understand and work with each of the application teams to say, here are all the data elements that you've got to bring over before you get started. To your point, now you could just click a couple buttons, bring everything over. You don't have to worry about, oh, did I just take a small subset of what I needed for now, and I'm going to have to go back and recode and bring in more stuff later on. It's bring in everything that you need up front, and maybe your proof of concept is focused in one small area, but when you're ready to expand, you already have all the data at your fingertips to expand to.
Exactly right. And I think one of the big concerns right now too is because of the ease of being able to bring in that data is security and compliance. Those are by far some of the biggest things that come up constantly. I mean, you see in the news, X company was hacked, probably because somebody entered their password through a phishing email or something stupid. It's not like anyone's that sophisticated. But the point is that now people are very concerned about that, which is legitimate. But the thing is, these softwares too make it really easy to manage, and not only manage, but also understand the permissions and who has access to these applications. I mean, think of the days when you're trying to provision across an Oracle database or some other application. You're like, wait, does this role actually apply to this object? Who is there overlap here? And then you do some audit years later for some of these companies. They're like, wow, I had no idea so many people had access to all of these objects. Whereas now people have made it a lot simpler to understand the security model in these cloud applications to be able to manage that much more easily. So I would say, even though it is much easier to bring in that data, security should always be a number one consideration when doing that. And that way you make sure someone who doesn't just have, and not everyone's an admin who can then see HR data and finance data that they shouldn't do. It's, hey, at least take a moment to be a little thoughtful about how you want to build your schema and your data stores within something like Snowflake, and then say, all right, well, we want to segment this data by different schemas or by different tables, by different roles. So you have a lot of different options to do that. You can mask the data. So the point being, the functionality is there. You just have to be very thoughtful about security to be able to accomplish that. Otherwise, somebody's gonna get an email they're not happy with and probably lose their job. So something to watch out for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And it's sometimes some of the I'll just call them legacy applications. It's a puzzle to figure out who has access to what and what this access even means. where like for one client, I had to go build a utility to like visualize their, like, you don't have access to this account because of this permission that's over here that does it. And it's just kind of layered on top of there. So making security, provisioning, understanding, reporting on it, things like that easier is definitely something that has a lot of value in today's ecosystem, especially with the shift to cloud. Back in the past, you mentioned about shifting a customer over. Now they're on 4 or 5 different cloud applications over there. To go to 4 or 5 different vendors in the past to go and buy their product and spin up separate servers and all that kind of stuff used to be next to impossible, unless you had an astronomical IT budget for provisioning all these tools. Now you can go and buy best in class of everything that you need because you don't have to worry about the infrastructure behind it.
And I think there's a big part about that too, where, and maybe I can't remember if I mentioned earlier, but the reason they're even doing this transition in the first place, it's because it's not, again, I don't want this to be another shiny IT project for somebody to go chase. There's significant cost savings of moving off of Informatica to the modern data stack. And I'm talking, $150,000 or more, and they're not a huge company or anything like that, but you have to think about, there are significant cost savings. Yes, there's always the implementation cost, but because these tools are so much easier to stand up, if you find the right partner to be able to go support those, you can go very easily knock those out much quicker than you could with some of these larger enterprise applications from the past as well. And the reason I mention that is, because budget, again, is top of mind for people in finance right now. So just because you bring in more technologies, no, it doesn't always mean you're going to save money, but there are opportunities to get off some of this enterprise technology that is costing you a lot of money that no one's really taken the time to look at until that time has come, when you're like, oh, we got to make all these budget cuts, when you're paying all this money for something you didn't need in the first place. And one other thing I'll add to that too is that not only is the budget savings, so you get budget savings, you get the opportunity to be on the latest and greatest technology, but then the third thing to really consider as your organization grows is talent. And so what I mean by that is, there's so many different data engineering, data analysts, different any kind of analyst or who's going to work with data at different companies. But the problem is, people don't want to work with this legacy tech anymore. And I'm not necessarily calling Informatica legacy, but Power Center itself is not that fun to work with when you think of the new latest and greatest technologies. And they're learning about that. They're going to these classes, these boot camps. They're getting courses in college about some of these more modern cloud applications. And so they're going to go to want and work at companies that actually have that technology as well. So not only are you putting in the best tech and saving money, oh, by the way, now you're recruiting people who actually want to be part of that too. So you're going to get better talent who's going to be more excited to be there to support your data initiatives in the company as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And part of, or one of the many reasons why I started the show here was just because I realized that in my conversations with various companies, that there isn't a lot of knowledge on different products. It was much easier in the past to stay on top of, if you were an Informatica shop, that used to be one of 2 or 3 ETL tools out there to go and bring data over. So it was much easier to understand, well, here are the latest and greatest tools and here's why I should be using them. Now you've got the cloud, you've got a lot of different companies spinning up left and right on here. How do you recommend companies kind of just staying on top of, here are the areas that were the tools that I should be paying attention to? Because like I said, there are a lot that say, hey, look, I talked to a company a few months ago, and I was just telling them about EPM technology, just basic reporting, right, and planning and budgeting, and they didn't even know that a tool like that existed out there. And I'm like, well, it's something like that is more common than some of these other tools that are out there. But I know a lot of companies struggle to really, they're having a hard enough time just doing their jobs to begin with, and now it's, how do I properly research and understand what technologies out there and what I should be investing in and looking into.
Yeah, I think certainly a lot of information these days now you'll find on LinkedIn and maybe some other social platforms. I know people are pretty big about that. But the biggest thing, at least talking to our clients, is always your industry peers. And you're going to go talk to somebody and say, hey, over at company X that might be a competitor or not, what are you guys doing? What have you seen? And I will say that's where people seem to get a lot of their information as it relates to some of these technologies. And then it's also, what are you guys doing? Give us some use cases. And then so you're learning from your peers. So that includes even going to industry conferences. It may not necessarily be specific to the technology or even to the data that's relevant to what's on top of mind, but you may run into somebody there who's in a similar space as you, and they're doing similar things as well at their company. So even if it's just an industry conference as a whole, you're going to learn some of those things as well. And of course, the other thing is there's a lot of good content online through blogs and other media and just even Googling around a little bit. But the problem is, I mean, even if you look at FP&A tools today, there's probably 100 different cloud FP&A tools because everyone thinks they're going to make the next big, latest, and greatest one. When at the end of the day, they all do pretty much the same thing. It just depends on what size of company you are, what industry you're in, what functionality is more important to you compared to some of these other tools, and then finding it there. But it's just overwhelming at times. That's why I do think a lot of it's looking to people in your community. And community is such a big thing right now, especially now that a lot of people are remote. I mean, Stratos is a fully remote company as well. We have people across 8 different states. So it's always finding different ways to get people interacting and engaging together. And so some of these things that are out there now are these online communities of like-minded industry peers or people just at similar kind of places in their career. And then you can just, so for example, I'm in a couple different Slack channels like this, and I've heard the same with some colleagues in IT at our clients. And essentially, when they have a question, they just drop it in there. And then you get a response from like 50 industry peers who are also C-level VP of whatever you are. And then you get real-time feedback from people like that as well. So research can only take you so far, and then you'll do proof of concepts. But there's still that not knowing that you're just like, is this really the right move? Until you get that buy-in from a friend or someone who's just like, oh, yeah, we did that before, and it's great. So it's still, referrals is still one of the biggest ways for information around all that.
And I know you mentioned about referrals, but like when you evaluate and look at, what are the types of tools that you invest in for, for your team to learn about, recommend, and all that, is that like what criteria do you typically have for, yeah, we're gonna also implement this technology or that technology?
And when you say for us, is it more around us internally as a team or just for what we want to bring to market for our clients?
What you want to bring to market for your clients?
Oh, yeah, I got you. Yeah, so I think it's a lot of what I just said, but then to another level where we are going to specific conferences. So if you think of like the Snowflake conference, Tableau conference, or even there's a lot of online webinars and content. So you think of DBT's putting stuff out there, Fivetran, Informatica, all of these companies are putting things out there. And now it's just finding out, okay, well, what's actually right for my audience and my client base? Because so many of these competitors up there, you think about like Microsoft, Amazon, Google. Now you have Snowflake, some other platform, Databricks. All of them do a lot of the same things, but then you got to find what's the right costing model, what's the right functionality, does this fit into their current architecture that's out there today? So we do a lot of that analysis up front, and then we actually do this all the time for our clients. We'll call it more of a technology assessment, and we'll go in and say, okay, well, here's what you have today. Here's your current tech stacks. Maybe you have an Oracle database, you have an EPM application, you have Informatica, and then we start to ask, okay, well, where do you want to go? Why is this even top of mind for you in the first place? Why do you even want to consider changing? A lot of it can be cost driven. It could be there's just too much legacy tech debt that they want to get out of and start to have more of a true scalable architecture, so it's easier to bring in other data in the future. And so understanding those true kind of decision points and requirements, then we start to go analyze the various technologies out there. We'll interact with the different tech teams, the sales force. We'll do our own research. We'll check with industry peers and colleagues as well. And we'll start to compile all of this information. And then you really start to narrow in on, okay, what's best practices for this organization? Because for us, we're not a company that goes and says, oh, you're on Oracle, so you got to do everything Oracle. You're on SAP, do everything SAP, Microsoft, whatever. Most of our clients have a variety of different technologies that are right and fit for them within their company culture. Now, you talk to any salesperson at any of these big companies at Oracle, they'll be like, oh, well, that's not a best practice. You have to be on Oracle because all of our applications talk to each other and they're the latest and greatest. Well, no, That's not always true because even their own applications don't talk to each other that well. And just because it's the same company does not make it the best technology either. You might find a better master data management platform for managing your FP&A hierarchies that better integrates with your EPM system. They might be different companies, but that's right for you. It means if you look at something and you say it's saving you time, it's putting less stress out there, it's saving you money, and you're happy with it, who cares if they say it's a best practice? Their best practices are not your best practices at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that just, brings up a great point on, at least, something that I always recommend all the time is this is why it's really important for you to have the right partner in your organization that's, not in it just for, hey, what's going to get me the biggest commission or what's going to get me, what I want to do, but somebody that's actually looking at, hey, I'm not telling you to buy Oracle because I implement Oracle. I'm telling you to buy Oracle because, I've done this research and that research and, this is what is being done. And a lot of companies just buy what they say, oh, someone told me I needed dashboarding, so I bought what I thought was a good dashboarding tool, right? And in reality, it's this is why it's important to make sure that you have somebody that's actually acting in your best interest and saying, yeah, eventually you're going to want dashboarding. Why don't we get the foundation right now? Why don't we start prioritizing? Let's take a step back and look at, well, what do you want to get out of dashboarding? Just buying it isn't going to increase your capabilities. Using it and using it in the right way is.
Exactly. And I think if we pivot the conversation a little bit, if that's all right, just to the maybe it's not tech debt, but if you think of a large company that they have thousands of employees, there's a good chance they have hundreds of different software licenses or deals or things that they're signed up for. But the question is always, are people using those things? Are people actually getting the value of why they paid for those in the first place? And so this is a perfect example of why we created this supplier 360 analytics dashboard in the first place for one of our clients, because they had that question top of mind. They knew that there were a lot of redundancies in their technology and other vendors with it that they were paying within their organization. They knew they were spending so much time and effort to actually compile the information to analyze their list of suppliers and where their spend is going, where they're spending valuable dollars within their organization. And they never felt like they had the data or the information to have fruitful conversations during either vendor negotiations or evaluations or who to strategically source into this organization. And so what they set out to do is they said, well, we need all the data in one spot and we need it consistent, we need it accurate, and we need it timely. So that was the biggest thing for them is it would take them almost a quarter to get the data they needed to see where spend was going on in their organization. And by putting in this project, which essentially was pulling data out of their ERP, out of their contract management system, out of a third party risk rater called Dun and Bradstreet to get more financial health on companies, a few other different internal data sources, we're able to bring that all together into a data warehouse, put a dashboard on top of the Supplier 360 analytics, and now someone within procurement and strategic sourcing, if they had a question on any of their suppliers, they could go into this dashboard and in near real time get answers to what previously took them weeks, if not all the way up to a quarter, to get that information. And so what they're able to do by having this, going back to the example of redundancies in technology, they could go in their organization. They say, okay, let me sort by category. Let me look at supplier category for technology. And now let me start to see where there's overlap in these technologies, be it across departments or even sometimes within the same department. And so what you find in some of these situations, you're like, wait, so we have Tableau, we have Power BI, we have Looker, and it's like, I didn't even know we had half these products. And then you come to find out, you ask the question, well, who's actually using those? All right, you go talk to the owners of those applications, and they say, oh, yeah, we got those licenses years ago. They've been using it in sales for some time. Okay, now I got to go talk to sales. So you go talk to sales. Like, we don't know what that is. I've only been here a year. None of our team seems to know. And then you go look and you're spending $100,000 a year on some of these technologies that nobody is using because it was bought by some previous VP some years ago, and no one ever, it went into auto renewal on the contracts, and people are like, yep, we probably still need that. It's business critical. But no one actually challenged the status quo. And so by having easy access to this information in something like a dashboard that brings all of your supplier data together, you can now start to go do that analysis, and then when you start to say bring you start to move people off these other technologies, it likely means you're going to increase some spend with some other vendors. Well, you can go to those vendors and you can say, hey, we'd like to make you our exclusive supplier for our visualization tool or for our data platform in our business. We're going to get rid of these other technologies. What can you do for us? What kind of discounts can you get? What multi-year contracts can you do for us? And if they don't say, hey, but we're going to then go consider one of these other vendors. So it's giving you that information to have the power to be really strong and confident in these supplier negotiations, which if you ask anyone in procurement or sourcing, a lot of the times they are not those things. And a lot of it comes down to not having access to the information that they need in the first place.
Yeah, no, that's a great point because, in the past it used to be, hey, I want to buy this product, negotiate the contract of it, it gets purchased, and then that's the end of it. And nobody, ever revisits that until they get a knock on the door. It's time for renewal of this product. And then everyone's like, what is that product again? Right. But now you've got data and analytics on everything where, to your point, I've worked with several companies where, it turned out that, oh, you had a license for this product and this other group is using it. They also have a license for the product. The two of you have enterprise licenses for this product. And how did that happen? And, and there's, you can't always trust that your vendor is keeping track of all this stuff in terms of, what licenses your company has and whether they should be selling, two enterprise licenses to the same company, to begin with. But, you find that things like that happen all the time. Or, to your point, someone buys, an Oracle database and someone else is getting a SQL Server database and somebody else is, buying Snowflake and there's no standard. And, not only is it a difficult thing from a maintenance standpoint, you have to have people in house that have expertise on all that. You're double, triple paying in licenses for, there's cost efficiencies to moving on to one platform. It just gives you more power of, negotiation, being able to run, with the right expertise in your company without having to, find someone that's an expert in Oracle and Microsoft and Amazon and Snowflake. And, because those people, as are very, very easy to find if you start, posting on job boards of people with 20 years of experience in each of those different areas. You'll find a handful of people on the planet that have it.
Exactly. And I think that's the other thing too, because we're seeing an exact situation there where somebody has SQL Server, they have Redshift, there's another database I can't remember, but now it's moving them off of all of that legacy into Snowflake. And so yes, there's going to be the cost savings by just bringing that into a single contract, but to your point, now the management of that goes down significantly. They actually one of their team members they actually left the company who was responsible for all of that. But now by moving it to Snowflake, they're actually able to save and not have to rehire an FTE again to cover that. So that's one of the costs that often goes overlooked, I think, in these discussions where people say, well, Snowflake's expensive or cloud applications are expensive. I'll bring everything back to on-premise. It's like, yeah, but if you have to go hire a full-time person for like $200K a year with benefits, bonus, all of these other things, and oh, by the way, they're only one person, they don't have that deep industry or technical expertise across a variety of stacks, are you really saving money? Well, no, even just adding up the numbers, you're not, because you're hiring this person now that you didn't have to before. So when people say total cost of ownership, too often people are in this old mindset of, oh, it's all about the applications, because that's what on-premise focus was. Total cost of ownership in the cloud, it's about the applications and it's about the people. It might even be more so about the people as well. And I say people and who are actually managing that, so you don't need full-time people anymore. And I mean in people's sanity, because they don't have to deal with all the nonsense that they would always experience with these applications that throw errors, error code 404 or 1000 that you know nothing about, where these cloud applications, they don't show you that stuff. It's so much simpler than it used to be in the past. So total cost of ownership, I think, it's getting thrown around a lot. That's not truly looking at the total cost of ownership these days, which is really impactful when you are considering going to the cloud.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm the expert in the 404 error message, by the way. But I know we're getting close to the end over here. But I guess just a last question for you is, company says, hey, I think I have too much technology or too many different types of technologies, and they want to go through a process of simplifying and maybe bringing all consolidating systems, like what do you recommend just in terms of steps of how do you get from where you are today to that desired future state?
Yeah, and I will say before even looking into a technology or anything outside of your company, let's start by saying what's the objective and why we want to do this in the first place. So it's because we want to consolidate because there's cost savings opportunities. So, well, how do we know there are cost savings opportunities? Well, first of all, we need to go catalog and document everything going on in these systems. And I mean everything that's actively going on in these systems because so many companies have legacy data and integrations that have been running for years and years and years that nobody is looking at and nobody is using. So, first of all, you need to go audit your environment. You need to catalog it. You need to document what's active. And then you need to look at what's actually costing you the most as well. Cost as it relates to data storage, volume, transformations, and things that are going to be challenging to troubleshoot. So, again, cataloging all that as well. And then you have to overlap that with time. So when there are issues or people are managing environments, who's responsible for that and how many hours a week are they actually doing? And then, of course, being able to come up with a number based on their cost per hour and what that looks like. So now you can build this picture of what the cost is actually going on. And then you could say comparably, all right, well, now I need to understand what my options are out there from a technical perspective, as well as resourcing who's going to support this in the future. And you start to do some comparisons there to see what's possible. Of course, there's always the implementation aspect of it as well, recognizing that's a more of a one-time cost and not necessarily a long-term. And then even if you do all of those things, if it's still that you see something that's going to add so much business value, then it still might be worth doing it, even if you're not necessarily saving a ton of money. Because if the business value for them is actually saving money, and I guess that factors into your ROI technically, but not truly within the tech stack itself, then the value is still there. So, yes, you can go do all these things, but if you're going to interrupt, if you're going to do the opposite and you're actually interrupting people's jobs and not making it easier, then you should really consider, is this the right move that you're thinking in the first place to begin with? So recapping there, I think a lot of it's focused on cataloging, understanding the impact, the cost, everything there, and then focusing on the business impact, documenting that. Is this going to add value for them? And then trying to figure out the right approach from there.
Yeah, that I mean that's a great point. And I was talking to a family member the other day, and he's more on the IT infrastructure side, and they were looking at an analysis of should we move a bunch of our development environments over to the cloud, and just start throwing a bunch of VMs on either Azure or AWS or a different provider. And he did that kind of analysis and looked at it deeper and said, hey, like 80% of these environments are dev environments where it hasn't been, we haven't even installed a later operating system on it in 10 years, so do we even need these environments? And they sent out an email to everybody, and of course nobody replies to the emails. So they said, we're going to shut this down unless you tell us not to. No one told them not to. They shut down the dev instances, and only one person complained, and they had like 100 servers out there. So, you can go through and say, hey, there's cost savings on me moving to the cloud for this infrastructure. But if you don't first do that analysis of, do I actually need these environments in the first place? The best kind of cost savings is just shutting it down instead of, going and paying to migrate it over and pay the ongoing costs for something that you still don't need.
Yeah, and I've one final thought on that too. Someone has to be willing to take the chance on doing that, like your family member did, because so many people do the opposite and they'll just start incurring more and more tech debt by just getting more and more licenses because they're too afraid to shut something off, either because they don't know what's going to happen or they just don't want to go around and ruffle any feathers within the business because nobody likes IT and they're afraid of what's going to come of it. But to your point, if you just do it and see what happens and be prepared for the repercussions, you might see a lot of opportunity in cost savings because you took the risk to do that in the first place. Of course, when it's vetted and you go through your process a little more. But yes, completely agree.
Yeah, that's why it's important to have a structured approach to it instead of just, making the decision, and having all that data behind it is just going to help you make an even better decision over there. So I know that we're about out of time over here. Before we conclude, Nico, do you have any final recommendations or lessons learned or anything that you want to share with the audience here before we wrap up?
I think the biggest thing is that still being open-minded and open to change is the biggest driver of success in so many of these things. And also just having a little empathy with people. So you're going to take on some major initiatives this year. There's no question you're going to be stressed about it. It's going to be tough. It's going to be a struggle. But if you can rely on your team members and they trust you, and because you show some of that compassion and empathy in tough times, because you don't always know what's going on with people, and especially in this today's world with the remote environment, I think you're going to be really successful with your initiatives for 2024.
Oh, that's great. Profound words from Nicho over here. And this is why, we encourage everyone to, leave feedback on the show, subscribe to it, because we want to bring, other great guests just like Nicho on here to, to share their experience and, what's worked well for them. So, as always, Nicho, I appreciate the time. We learned a lot here from going through all these different topics with you over here. Love to have you, on the show again at a future.
Really appreciate it, Daniel. Always good just chatting about chatting with you about some of these interesting topics. So looking forward to doing it again in the future. Really appreciate you having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for our audience, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you if they have questions or interesting projects that they want your thoughts on?
Great question. Feel free to shoot me an email at nman@stratosconsulting.com. I'm also very active on LinkedIn. So Nicholas Mann, Stratos Consulting. Daniel can drop it in the show notes, I'm sure. So that's
Yeah,
that's it.
we're gonna share your email and your LinkedIn in the description, so that way it's a clickable link instead of listening and typing at the same time over there. So.
Perfect. Appreciate it.
All right, awesome. Well, appreciate the time, Nicho, and as always, you shared a lot of interesting tips and advice.
Sounds great. All right. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.